I'm Lisa Federico, and this is Inside Northwest Columbus. After spending decades in corporate marketing, I traded boardrooms for backyards because the best stories are happening right here at home. Every week, you'll meet entrepreneurs, creatives, and everyday neighbors doing extraordinary things across Worthington and Northwest Columbus. So let's jump into this week's conversation. Welcome to Inside Northwest Columbus. I'm your host, Lisa Federico. Thank you so much for joining me today. In January, we are covering everything health and wellness. And with that, I want to welcome our guest, Courtney Shihabuddin, to the show. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Courtney has a very interesting practice. She is focused on women's health. Empowered Wellness is her company.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited for her to be here. There's so much for us to talk about. And I want to start with everyone that I talk to, all of my friends. At some point, we all get on this conversation about women's health and how we feel like we've been dismissed by our primary care providers. I was one of those people. I was really tired. I wasn't feeling like myself. And I was told, welcome to 58.
Oh, no.
And that's not acceptable. I didn't know that at the time. Tell me a little bit about why you started Empowered Wellness, because
Absolutely.
you have an amazing story.
Yeah. So I started Empowered Wellness mostly because I was in a similar situation, except at a much younger age. And that was because when I was 35, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And the treatment that I had threw me into basically a medical menopause way earlier than expected. And I experienced all of those symptoms that you kind of alluded to, or not feeling like yourself, but I was having hot flashes and night sweats. I was gaining weight. I was feeling really anxious and depressed and cancer during a pandemic, but also just about the most ridiculous things. They were keeping me up at night, or I was falling asleep and waking up at 3 a.m. drenched, or just waking up at 3 a.m. and I couldn't go back to sleep, and I was tired all the time. And, trying to be a mom and work a full-time job and take care of my kids. And I just felt awful. And I went to my oncologist, and she basically was like, well, that's just the side effects of your treatment. There's nothing really that we can do about that. You just have to power through for 10 years, and then you'll be 45, and you'll probably just be already postmenopausal early. And I was like, great. I don't want to die of breast cancer. I want to do the treatment, but I also am miserable. So there has to be something that we can do. And she put me on antidepressants, which are, off-label, meaning not their primary indication, to help with just the hot flashes. And honestly, they did help with the hot flashes,
Okay.
But it didn't help with anything else. Maybe a little bit of mood elevation, because that was its primary goal, but it wasn't helpful. And, time went on, and the straw for me that broke the camel's back was the genitourinary symptoms that I experienced, really that grossly affected my quality of life. I mean, I had a Peloton bike. It hurt to ride the bike. It was just constant discomfort. And I went to my OBGYN, and I basically said, I'm having all of these, vaginal dryness, things like that, symptoms. And she basically said, well, I'm going to go rogue and offer you vaginal estrogen. Your oncologist probably won't like it. And I mean, that helped me tremendously, just be able to sit, to go to the bathroom without burning, to, even bring up intimacy with my husband. It was just something that grossly improved my quality of life and allowed me to get through 5 years of cancer treatment before I said, I got through 5 years. I'm not doing another 5. Yeah. And the symptoms, resolved when I stopped my cancer treatment. But then my friends started going through the same thing. I had insight into it because I had done research during this time. It's not something that's routinely taught in medical education, about perimenopause or the signs of menopause, or how to, we know what it is, but we don't really manage it because it's not included in part of medical education.
Yeah, which shocks me. Mm-hmm. But then again, it doesn't shock me because all of my friends, right, we always come back to, oh, I'm feeling the same way.
Yep.
And, again, being dismissed, it doesn't shock me if they've only had a couple hours of training. But it's the weird symptoms that I think a lot of women don't realize are perimenopause. For me, I had shoulder pain.
Yep, frozen shoulder.
I never would have thought that that was one of these symptoms.
That's a symptom of low estrogen.
I, of course, didn't know that because I'm not trained like you are.
No. And, there are 66 symptoms of perimenopause, including frozen shoulder, anxiety, itchy skin, itchy ears, ringing in your ears, bloating, abnormal period fluctuations, irritability, rage, having these big reactions, and then having hindsight to say, oh, I wouldn't have normally reacted that way. Why am I so triggered by that? Not sleeping, waking up at 3 a.m., just fatigue all the time, low libido, vaginal dryness, burning with urination, vaginal itching. Like all of these things are signs of these fluctuating hormone levels. We call perimenopause, which is the 10 years leading up to menopause, the zone of chaos. And it's really because you wake up in the morning and you really just don't know how your day is going to go, whether you're going to have normal activity, whether you're going to, walk into a room and forget why you were there in the first place, having this brain fog, or just having a conversation and just drop off mid-sentence and just not remember what it was that you were talking about.
That was me. And I was so freaked out by it because I had never had a problem catching my words.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I couldn't even remember like 3 things consecutively. And so many times we chalk it up to stress or we chalk it up to we're just crazy. I had anxiety that was like off the chart. That is not me at all.
No.
And I think so many of us suffer through this because we just don't know.
Right.
So,
or we go to our providers and we say, like, I'm feeling this way. And they say, well, let's order some labs, right? Let's see if your hormones are normal. Well, if it hasn't been more than 12 months since your final period, your hormones are going to be normal, right? And unless you have sought out education on how to manage this, your provider just says, well, everything's normal. Yeah, it's normal because I'm still menstruating, but it doesn't mean that I'm not feeling out of control.
right.
Right? And what women are looking for is being able to feel like themselves again. And when all of my girlfriends were having the same conversations that you were having, and I had been through this and realized, I had educated myself on how to treat women in this way, and I had started doing it at the free clinic where I work. They were saying, well, why aren't you doing this for other people? Because I've been to my PCP, I've been to my OBGYN, I've been to, looking for help. And everybody just tells me that this is a normal sign of aging, but they don't do anything to mitigate it. And that kind of was the thing that pushed me to say, I can make a difference here. I can help women regain control.
Yeah. And really the difference is like night and day once you get everything sorted out.
Yeah.
I also was compounded with Hashimoto's, right? So I had all kinds of stuff going on. But once you get it all in gear, you do start to feel more like yourself.
Right. I tell women, give me 12 weeks of your time and I will get you feeling at least 80% better.
Yeah.
And some people it takes way less than that. And some people it takes a little bit longer, but no 2 women are ever the same. No 2 treatments are ever going to be the same. What I do is so highly individualized, and I'm not treating a lab. I'm treating a person, and we tinker, right? We make small adjustments and we see, how do you feel now compared to how you felt 2 weeks ago? Yes. And it makes just the world of difference.
Well, and it's a relationship.
Absolutely.
That I don't think that many of us are getting from traditional primary care.
I agree.
And I think that that's one of the beautiful things that you do in our community. And I love that it's telehealth.
Yep.
I love that I don't have to go to a doctor's office. Not that I care. It's just that it's one less thing, right? That I have to put on
We're so busy.
Right. And it's so great just to be able to pick up the phone, right, and have a conversation. We're taking just a quick break, but before we jump back in, I want to give you a sneak peek at what's coming this February. Our Love Local issue is all about celebrating the businesses, makers, and service providers who add real value to life here in Northwest Columbus, in the people who make this community feel like home. On the podcast, we're sitting down with passion-driven owners who are doing business differently and pouring heart back into our neighborhoods. You'll walk away with new favorites, fresh perspectives, and a whole lot of pride for where we live. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to grab your free digital copy of the magazine. You'll find the link in the show notes below. I want to talk a little bit about hormone replacement therapy and HRT. I am of an age group where, we were bombarded with information 10, 15, 20 years ago about how terrible HRT was for you.
Yes.
That you shouldn't be on estrogen because it causes cancer. And the community was very against putting women on any kind of hormones. But that report that had come out, which we'll talk a little bit about, was flawed.
Yep.
And the research now indicates that getting on hormone replacement therapy 10 years before you hit menopause can be beneficial. It can be much more beneficial for women. Talk a little bit about that, because I do think a lot of women are like, ooh, HRT causes cancer.
So the Women's Health Initiative was the largest women's health study ever published. It was published in 2002, and it was with the intention of studying cardiovascular risk reduction. And what they found, they took women who were 65 and older, and so they were more than 10 years out of the menopausal window. The average age of menopause for a woman in the United States is 51. And so they were looking at older women, right, who had gone through menopause a considerable amount of time ago. We say now that, the goal of getting on hormone therapy is within the first 10 years of that final period. And so these women were more than 10 years past that. And they randomized them into either, they broke them down, either women who had a uterus or women who did not. And the women who had a uterus got synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. And synthetic estrogen with no progesterone if they did not have a uterus. And then they got combo therapy if they did. And then, of course, there was a placebo group who got nothing. And they saw in the women's group that had no progesterone a significant reduction in cardiovascular disease and in breast cancer incidence. And they saw in the group that had a combination, they saw significant reduction in cardiovascular disease, which was the goal of the study. And then they saw a slight increase in incidence of breast cancer, but not death from breast cancer. And if we look at the general risk of breast cancer in the normal population, it's 20%, right? We have a 1 in 8 chance of developing breast cancer. Just walking down the street, being born, being female.
Right.
And so this was not dramatically increased over that. And mammograms weren't done prior to entering the trial. So we don't know if they already had breast cancer prior to it. We also don't really use the progesterone medication that was used in this study anymore. It's still on the market. It's just not commonly used. What we use now are bioidentical hormone therapy primarily. So the same things that our body naturally produces, estradiol and micronized progesterone. The study used synthetic conjugated equine estrogen, so estrogen that's in birth control pills, that's manufactured from the urine of pregnant horses, as well as synthetic progestogens, which are similar to what's found in birth control pills, but not the type of progesterone that we use in menopausal hormone therapy. So the study was flawed in that the media saw this, small increased risk in one arm of the study of breast cancer and ran with it. And everything else, all the positives that came out of that study were just suppressed. And overnight, women who had been on hormone therapy stopped. So we went from 45% of the menopausal population who were on hormone therapy at the time of the WHI's release to currently now in 2025, 4%.
Oh, really? It's that low. How does this happen? Like, I'm always thinking that my medical professional is going to be looking over studies and is going to be able to like see through that. How did this happen where the media kind of took over and now the medical community is like, oh, well, that's what media said.
Remember, this happened, 23 years ago. So we have like 2 generations of providers, physicians who came out of medical school saying hormone replacement therapy causes breast cancer. Not to mention the fact that there was a black box warning on it saying it increases the risk of death, cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, etc., which as of November of 2025, that black box label has been removed, saying it does not cause those things on menopausal hormone therapy, so on bioidentical estradiol. Not synthetic conjugated equine estrogen, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy does not carry any of those risks.
But doesn't it strike you as odd that there was an entire study?
Oh, yeah.
And how many different associations, professional associations, how many people really dug through that? And how come some of these professionals didn't come back and say, well, yeah, but you're only focusing on it's shocking to me that
we also have to remember that women were not required to be included in any clinical research until 1996. So of course. So all of the studies that we have that we use in clinical practice today, for the majority, are how medications affect men, and then they're applied to women, thinking that we react and
the exact
same way. And that's clearly not the case, but there is not money behind including women until recently. And I think what happened was we have a generation of females who are not only advocating for patient care, but women who are experiencing it themselves as providers who are saying, something's not right here. It's not matching up. Right. And then we have Australia and the UK who are practicing menopausal hormone therapy. It's FDA, it's their equivalent of approval. It's on the market. They have indications for these drugs and they have fantastic results. So why are we so hesitant here in the US? What's different here? Nothing. Right. So, I mean, the UK, Australia, they have an indication for testosterone for women. They have a medication that's been approved. Here in the United States, if we're prescribing testosterone for women, we are having to use male-approved testosterone because there's no drug that's FDA approved for testosterone for women, and essentially dose reduce it for a female.
Right.
And there's no money behind studying this for women, and so therefore that's
how
approval.
It proliferates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. But there's 15 different drugs to treat erectile dysfunction.
Well, of course.
Right.
It's very important. I want to go back to something you said about how most medical providers only have a couple hours.
7 hours in 8 years of medical education.
That shocks me.
Mm-hmm. And nothing on perimenopause.
Well, and I mean, a little more than half of our population is made up of women.
Correct.
So I'm shocked by that. Tell me about the additional training that is available.
Oh, yeah.
But that you would have to.
You have to do yourself.
Right.
So I went through the Heather Hirsch Academy and completed a very in-depth course on identifying the signs and symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and went through countless studies, data that has been produced since the WHI, looking at why and how to do this. And so I've done that. I've done countless other courses as well on hormone replacement therapy. And they are out there. You just have to look for them yourself. And I do think that as time goes on, the louder that we, as mostly females in the medical community — now I don't want to say that there aren't men who are voicing this, because there definitely are, but I think it's primarily driven by women. I think we will see that this will change, but it takes time to change the entire ACGME, the accrediting board that physicians go through for their education. I know as a nurse practitioner and as an educator, I am teaching this in my program so that my students come out understanding how to treat a woman in menopause. Now, they may not be doing it every day and then not understand all the nuances, but they're certainly not going to come out and gaslight a woman who comes in with symptoms, or they better not.
Right. Exactly. But as a traditional physician, right, that's been in practice for 10 or 15 years,
they don't
20,
have anything on this unless they've gone looking for it.
Yeah, and they would have to raise their hand and actually go out and do that training and recognize that this is an issue.
But the problem is, I mean, when I have visits with my patients, I'm sitting with them for an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm going through their entire medical history, and I'm going through, their family history, and we're going through risk calculators, and we're having very long conversations about risk and benefit and, what choice we're going to make to move forward. And your typical PCP or your OBGYN within a health system doesn't have an hour.
Right. They have 15 minutes. Right.
15 minutes if they're lucky.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think they just don't have, I don't want to fault them, right? They weren't taught this in their training. And the system, prevents them from being able to have the conversations that are necessary in order to do this well.
Didn't get the magazine at home? No problem. You can read it for free by signing up for our digital issues. Just head to the link in the show notes. And hey, if you're just listening to this episode, did you know you can watch it too? Catch the full video on YouTube, link below. And I do think that some people worry about if I have a conversation with my physician, right, and they document that I'm depressed or that I have anxiety, that can come back to bite you when you are trying to get insurance. I mean, that can be a huge factor.
And so when a woman comes to me and says, I'm feeling really anxious, well, I'm not documenting that they have anxiety. I'm documenting that they have perimenopause.
Yep. And that makes a huge difference.
And then I'm treating their perimenopause, which is going to alleviate their anxiety or their depression or their irritability or their rage.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit more, because I don't know that people understand the difference between perimenopause and menopause.
Yes.
And I also think that as women, we're just maybe conditioned to think that menopause is all about hot flashes.
Right.
And like we've talked about, there's so much more to it.
Right.
What is the difference between the two for our listeners so that they understand that they're not crazy, right? These all lead up to—
you're not crazy, right? So perimenopause we traditionally define as the 10-year period before that final period. Menopause is one day in your life. It is the day where you have not had a period in 12 months. And then everything after that one day is postmenopause. So perimenopause is leading up to it, and then post is the time after. So most of the symptoms that we experience that we think of as menopausal are really perimenopausal, because we're having them because our estrogen and our progesterone and our testosterone are all over the place. And they're up, they're down, then they're up, they're down, they're up, and then they're down, and you crash. And that is the 10 years before that final period where you're having all of these symptoms, not just the hot flashes and the night sweats, which are common, right? We know those because they're common, but little things like, you're up for some reason at 3 a.m. and you don't know why. You're not tired. You're not anxious. You're just awake and you can't go back to sleep. So you're tired, right? And then you're moody because you haven't slept well. And then, you're trying to do your job and you're working and you're giving a presentation and you blank. And then you feel like you're not good at doing your job. And we see an extraordinary amount of women in their 50s quit their high, powerful jobs because they think that they can't cut it anymore with their male counterparts. And it's not because they're developing dementia, right? It's because they're having symptoms of perimenopause, or after that final period, they're still having these symptoms of low hormones. And I think that it's so important that we recognize that it doesn't have to be that way. We can fix it.
Yeah.
And to think that you're going through this for 10, 15, 20 years. This is supposed to be the best, your 40s, your 50s, like your kids are getting older, you're established in your careers. Right. This is when you're supposed to like have the best time of your life. Like you've done it, right? And now you can reap the success of all of your hard work, except you feel like trash.
Right. And you keep questioning yourself. Right. The forgetfulness, the anxiety, the waking up at 3 a.m. My husband would beg to differ. I don't have rage, but maybe he would be. Maybe.
I think we all have moments.
Yeah, we do. Like when we're driving, right? It happens. But when a patient comes to see you, right? Talk a little bit about, I know we get into lots of conversations because you do have to have a good knowledge of the background.
Yes.
But can you talk a little bit about, hey, if a woman is waking up at 3 a.m., right, what are some things that you can do for them? Or if they have joint pain. Yes. Like, I don't know that people really understand that with progesterone, you can solve some of these. Or with testosterone, you might be able to solve some of these. Talk a little bit about how that works.
So the more emotional response, the anxiety, the irritability, the rage, all of that has to do with when we're producing progesterone in our cycle. So we basically, when we're in perimenopause, we're basically in puberty in reverse.
Okay.
So think back to when you were 12, 13, you're first starting to get your menstrual period, you're having PMS, your emotions all over the place, you're fighting with your parents. That's what's happening now, but we're adults, right? And it's kind of the reverse. So we're having all of those premenstrual sort of symptoms, except our periods are not coming, or they're coming shorter together, or they're lasting a long time, or they're really far apart, or we're spotting. And so our hormones are constantly like, our brain is trying to send the signal to our ovaries to produce estrogen and progesterone, and it's not getting there. So they send more and more and more signals. And then finally you have this huge eruption when you ovulate, finally. And then you get all these crazy symptoms of moodiness and so what do? If we are replacing those hormones, we're keeping you at more of a steady state. So we're not having those huge fluctuations in emotions, but also in joint pain or in brain fog or difficulty finding words or getting hot or waking up soaked or all of these things because our bodies are at a steady state. They're no longer hurting for hormone or having a huge surge because they finally were able to ovulate and now they have so much estrogen that you're bleeding really heavy, your breasts hurt, things like that. Yeah. And so, when a patient comes to me and they're having, irritability, they've had anxiety out of nowhere, we start with progesterone because not only is that going to help with their mood symptoms, it's going to help them sleep. And when you can get a woman who is not sleeping to get sleep again, it's like they're a brand new woman, right? And it's a real domino effect. The fatigue affects so many things, not just mood, but weight gain, insulin resistance, the development of metabolic syndrome. It's all like if we can get you sleeping, that's when your body repairs itself.
Yeah. And
so that's when we can restore some function.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about testosterone.
Okay.
Because I know a lot of women get like, oh my gosh, I don't want to grow a mustache or,
No. So testosterone is something that in women, unlike estrogen and progesterone, which kind of fluctuate erratically, testosterone in women slowly declines over time. And what the symptoms of low testosterone can be fatigue. It can be just, some cognition, low energy levels, and we see a lot of declining libido. And that can be multifactorial, right? If you're having vaginal symptoms, you're not wanting to have intercourse because it hurts or it's not pleasurable. And so, we don't necessarily realize that our libido has declined because, if something hurts, you don't want to do it. That's how our brains are trained, right? Like you touch a hot stove, you burn your hand, you're not going to do that again. If sex hurts, you're not going to want to do it. So we don't sometimes realize that we've lost our libido because our testosterone has gone down because we have all these other problems that we're needing to fix. And so, when I usually, when a woman comes to me, we'll start with estrogen and progesterone, and we'll check their testosterone initially and have that in the back of the mind. Like, this will be a plan, but it's not the most pressing of the 3 hormones at this moment. But once we kind of get, the other things under control, if we're still struggling with brain fog, if we're still struggling with low energy, if we're still struggling to find our libido again, then testosterone is where we go. And we use extremely low doses of testosterone applied in a cream on the skin to help supplement what has been lost. And we do that. We monitor everything. I'm checking labs every 2 months to make sure that we're not going too high, because we don't want to develop male-like characteristics, like a deepening voice or male patterned hair loss or enlargement of our clitoris. We don't want those things. And so you're not really going to experience those until you have really high doses of testosterone for a prolonged period of time. And so when we're doing it, I'm giving you a tiny bit every day. And the goal is to further reduce that brain fog, to further, to improve that brain fog and that energy.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, for a lot of women, that's the missing piece. Some women come to me and they're not really having any symptoms of low estrogen and progesterone, but their testosterone is in the toilet or non-detectable. And so we'll start there. And some of them don't need the others yet. And so we'll just put them on testosterone and monitor. They feel great.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you keep coming back every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, right? So that you're able to do a check-in.
Correct.
It's not like, hey, come back and see me in a year.
No.
Yeah.
I see my patients primarily every 3 to 4 weeks while we're in that first 12-week period, kind of trying to tinker and figure out, is this the right dose? How have you felt over the last couple of weeks? What has improved, or where could we move the needle further?
Right.
With the goal of really getting you back to what you were before.
Yeah. And it's not really all about hormones.
No.
Because I know you've added nutrition and a dietitian on your team as well.
Yes.
There are other things that can help impact all of that.
Absolutely. When a patient comes to me, I'm not just treating their hormones. I'm not treating a problem. I'm treating a whole person. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where nurse practitioners differ from physicians, because in our education, physicians are taught to treat a problem. I'm married to a physician, so I feel like I can say that. They're taught to fix a problem. It doesn't matter what else is going on. I'm here to fix your heart. I'm only going to look at your heart, right? Yeah. Nurse practitioners are taught more holistically. And so, okay, you're having palpitations. Why? Why are you're feeling anxious? Why? How can we come at that from multiple different ways? Oh, you're having trouble with your cholesterol. Okay, I'm not just going to throw medicine at you. Let's sit down with our clinic dietitian and let's look at our foods. And are there supplements that we can take to help, increase the power of food being medicine first?
Yeah.
And then once we kind of maximize that, if we still need medical therapy, then let's add that on. We want to keep you safe, but let's do it synergistically for the whole person health rather than just like take this pill.
Yep. And when clients work with you, again, it's telehealth. So there is no office to go to.
Correct.
But yet you can still support them with labs and things like
Absolutely.
that. Talk a little bit about how that works.
Yeah. So a patient, and we'll come and have a conversation, and we sit down, we talk for about 30 minutes, and I listen to them and you're telling me, oh, I'm having these symptoms. And then I say, well, listen, this sounds like perimenopause or menopause, or, we're even doing more functional medicine now too, to include like gut health and bring that into with our dietitian as well. And here's what I think would be a great next step. If you'd like to move forward, let's get some labs. And then let's have an hour-long visit where we do a complete history. We go through your lab work, and we come up with a treatment plan to support you in your needs. If you'd like to move forward from there, then we'll start treatment. Mm-hmm. And then that's when we follow up every 3 to 4 weeks, depending upon what it is that we're treating, with the goal of healing the whole person. And I think we start with lab work. Some clinicians may say, if you're not postmenopausal, you don't need blood work. But I think that ruling out thyroid dysfunction, ruling out metabolic syndrome, looking at adrenal symptoms, I think is so important because, for example, I had a patient who came to me with perimenopausal symptoms, and it turned out she also has Graves' disease. So she's hyperthyroid. And are her symptoms perimenopause or are they symptoms of hyperthyroidism? And how did her PCP miss that?
Yeah.
So, we're working together because I'm trained in primary care too, and I'm helping to heal all of it. We'll get her thyroid under control. And then if she's still having perimenopausal symptoms, then we'll tackle those next.
Yeah.
And so no two people are ever the same. So it's hard, this is kind of my formula, but it's so tailored to each individual.
Yeah. And I love that about your practice and so many of the other independent practices, right, that are coming up because you're starting to get back to healthcare, I think, the way that it might have been 50 years ago when it really was about the whole person and not just about treating.
Insurance-based care.
Yeah. Exactly. Where can people get more information about Empowered Wellness, Courtney?
Sure. So our website is empowered-wellness.com. You can come and visit the website and make an appointment. On social media, we're at Instagram, we're empowered.wellness_, or my personal Instagram is np.courtney, where, we'll see a lot of cross posting, but really education for women about this time of their life and how to empower them to have the conversations, understand what's going on in their bodies, and make informed decisions.
Okay, fantastic. And you have a perimenopause guide, which we will put that link in our show notes. So if you're interested in that, it's chock full of information that can help you, right, kind of weed through what's going on and give Courtney a call. This was so great. Thank you
for
so
having
much.
me.
It was such a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on.
Of course.
And that is going to be a wrap for this episode of Inside Northwest Columbus. Like I said, read through the show notes. There's lots of great links to go to. And Courtney is also featured in our January issue. And you can read all of our digital issues online. Check the show notes. I've got some links in there for you. So until next time, we will see you on Inside Northwest Columbus.
Boxland Media. Think big.